Welcome to byProduct Live, where we unbox everything SaaS and product. We talk with experts and leaders in SaaS and product to understand their approach to leadership and ways of working, to share their knowledge and understanding. byProduct Live is brought to you in partnership with AmSource. AmSource are a specialist talent solutions business to startup and scaling tech businesses globally. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Armin Krahl to byProduct Live. Armin is a very experienced product leader working in scaling tech businesses, including Wayfair, Delivery Hero, and foodpanda. Armin's current role sees him working at one of Germany's oldest climate tech businesses, thermondo, where he's leading their digital product business in their mission to drive climate neutrality and energy efficiency in home heating. Armin's a keen cyclist and rode in a professional team until he was 23, but decided he was much better off focusing on the world of product. Today, we're going to be unpicking operating systems in product management, how to manage those systems, why it's fun, but also understanding there will be some mistakes on the way. Hello, Armin, and welcome to the show today. How are you?
Thank you, Andrew. I'm very well. Happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So let's dive straight into things. So operating systems in product management, what are they?
Yeah, so I think as consumers, we all know what an OS, right, an operating system is. It's a software system that manages computer hardware, software resources, provides common resources, services for computer programs, and so on. I kind of used to work in operations heavy businesses, and when you introduce basically technology or digital products to facilitate the operations of those business, you usually end up building what I would call an operating system for that company, for their processes, for their resources, and you provide basically services to its users and its customers, right? So I think traditionally in product we call that internal tools,
Okay.
but I don't think that really cuts it for me.
Okay. Okay. And when you say it doesn't cut it, so why is that the case?
I mean, if you think of an operating heavy business, right? I mean, let's take Amazon as a very classic example. Um, the value proposition is basically directly related to the excellency and the efficiency of their operations, right? So Amazon Prime, for example, a huge value proposition, right? It wouldn't be possible with an outstanding operating system behind it that makes it possible to ship things to you basically at the same day.
Okay.
So I think for me, those basically products that drive the outcomes, right, and are part of the value proposition of the company. They heavily impact customer experience, sometimes even much more than the customer facing experience itself. Right? Those, I mean, we can call them internal tools, but I think they're just much more than that.
Okay. And I'm guessing in your previous role, so for example at foodpanda, that would have been heavily operations as well, right? Because of the nature of the business. And
Yes, I
Wayfair.
mean in the food world, very classic. You have two big operators, the restaurants and the delivery riders, right? They're both backed up by operating systems. At Wayfair, I think Wayfair ships basically things around half the world directly in the living rooms of their customers. Wouldn't be possible without an operating system. Thermondo, where I am right now, we are installing heat pumps at thousands and thousands of houses all over Germany, requiring, I think, along the value chain, more than 35 different operating steps.
Yep.
It's impossible to operate at this scale without like a system that kind of supports it at every single step.
Yeah. So I guess this is almost around industrializing processes in product is almost what it sounds like. So how would you manage those operating systems, and why is it that you think it makes it fun?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it brings kind of three different things together, right? It's the product. Usually in any operations, you have a person or an
Yep.
operator or a user, right? To that extent, that basically operates the thing. And then you have processes, right? Because usually you have more than one person, and you want people to produce repeatable results. So you are in this triangle of not only product, but if you change your product, the process needs to change. The people, the users need to basically change, and I think that's a triangle in which you build operating system, and in the end, it's not so different than anything else we do at product management, right? You need to understand
Okay.
the end customer. That's always there. You need to understand your user or the operator, right, as I would call them. You need to understand your business and its
Yeah.
operations and processes, and
Of
kind of
course.
collaborate with the stakeholders. And then you need the technical acumen to converse with your engineers and tell basically what's required to build a successful product, a successful operation, and a successful basically system in that world. However, I think the devil is in the details. When it comes to building those systems, you need to be really in that details, and you need to enjoy being in that details.
Yeah. And I would imagine it's something where there's multiple things you need to understand in there. So things like obviously the processes are important, but actually then really break the details down into unit economics, understanding the scalability of the business. I would imagine they're absolutely critical in making this work.
Yes, yeah, it basically requires you to look kind of have a T-shaped
Yeah,
approach to things, right? You need to look across the entire value stream you're usually supporting with your system, and then in every step you need to also go deep and understand what's kind of required at the specific step where you're at. And as I've worked a lot in scaling business, I'm working again in the scaling business with kind of uh, climate tech picking up in Germany. This is where what you mentioned, unit economics, right? Or also like scalability comes into play. You need to understand, I mean, is what we do here, is that actually profitable? You also need to understand the operations that we currently run, at which point it might break. So at which point they actually need to rethink or rebuild or kind of start changing things, and or like how long I have time and it's okay. Um, and you need to understand actually. And this is, I think, where it also gets tricky, right? Because not every stakeholder likes this, but you also need to understand the processes, as you mentioned, and if they are best practice or rather obscure. Because
yeah,
the one thing you don't want to do is basically build your product around bad processes, right? So you have that like approach where you work really closely with your business, and also changing their processes to something which is more scalable and more systemizable in a system, in a product.
yeah, yeah. And I would imagine that it comes really important to get your stakeholders on board because you need everything aligned with the key stakeholders to make those processes work.
Yes, I mean, also not unseen in product management, right? Stakeholder management is like one of the core skills that we need. And I think the on board is definitely key. I try to call them partners in crime, or more partners and stakeholders, because I really
Yeah,
don't think it's like an agency customer relationship. It's more like what goals you want to achieve, or what goals the business needs to achieve. I need my stakeholders, right, to basically help me understand that. But they also kind of sometimes I also need to challenge them, and when kind of a certain process or a certain idea I don't think is sound from my perspective or isn't sound from a system perspective, I know that's hard to scale or hard basically to implement into the system. So it's really that, I mean, typical approach, right? Let's start with the problem, and then let's partner and finding the best solution that works for the triangle of product, process, and people. Um,
yeah, yeah. Cool. And I'm guessing with any process, this is a kind of continual review process as well, because the process will continue to evolve as the product evolves. Would that be right?
and as a business scales, definitely.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you're never done. I mean, usually you're never done in product, but as an operating system, you're for sure never done. And I think having, I mean, but I think that's a fun part, at least for me, right? Seeing the operation running through your system, being able to measure that, having data on how efficient a thing is that you build or that you currently have, improving that, then seeing how it gets better basically by by the data that you collect. That's actually not only key, but that's the right approach to change
yeah,
things. You an operating system, I think you usually should first start measuring and then start changing, not the other way around.
yeah, yeah. And I guess that leads us nicely into thinking about imperfect operations because by the nature, it's never really 100% cracked to be perfect. So Do you want to give a quick
Yeah,
overview around it in kind of that
yeah.
imperfect element?
Um, I mean, as product managers, you usually strive to build perfect products, right? And I think many product managers, like myself included, people in my team, other people I know, are kind of perfectionists. And then you enter the world of operations, you enter the real world. Like if you have physical operations that you support, if it's shipping things around the globe or basically installing heating systems or delivering food, inevitably things will go wrong. Right? It's not a matter how good your product is or not. It's just, it will go wrong. So it's more
Yeah,
like, do I have to think about how do I build a product around like something that is imperfect, right? Um, and I think we call this the happy pass and the unhappy pass.
yeah,
And yeah, if I think about like fuck ups I did in the early days, is exactly this, right? You build a happy path and you think you're done, and at one point you realize that was the easy part. So
yeah,
now the fun
yeah.
begins.
Yeah, I guess it's always easy when you've been there and seen where it goes wrong, though. Can you think of some examples that you've seen in the past where things have gone wrong?
Uh, um, uh, Many, and I kind of probably have to protect a little bit the companies I worked at,
Of
because
course, of course.
at scaling businesses, I mean, certain things just go wrong, and it's like not a bad intent or not even like an outcome that you're not kind of, you know, striving for excellency. But yeah, I think the one thing that always, also philosophically, also left me puzzled as a product manager, right? When a container at one time ended up in the wrong neighbor, you probably can guess the company.
Yeah,
My question was like, is that a tech bug or is that an ops fuck up? That's A, right? Like, was it us or was it them? And
yeah.
B, I mean, I could go to the database and change that, right? I can basically fix in a database and make the container be in the right location.
Look like it's in the right
However,
place.
the Haber will still charge us like $32,000 in fines every day because we just
Wow.
shouldn't have a container there. So how do you resolve that actually? Which makes you kind of humble these mistakes, and also kind of, it's more like, okay, go to your stakeholders and collaborate on, okay, how can we fix that? And it's not so much about, was it you or was it me? You know, it's more like, okay, how can we resolve that together? And yeah, I think sometimes that's a daily fire you have to just put out.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we've done a really quick dive into operating systems today, Armin, but what would you say are the key three takeaways for people listening today that they should be able to take away if they're thinking about this subject?
Yeah, I mean, building operating system is challenging, but it's extremely rewarding and fun. So if you have never done that, and then if you look basically next steps in your career, like consider it, right?
Yeah.
Look out for companies that run physical operations and build basically their own products to support it. Um, I think number two would be really know your operator really well. Um, Ideally, try to operate the thing yourself. Like in food, I used to deliver food once a quarter. I never cooked in a restaurant because that's not my strong suit, but observe basically the kitchens
So you were out on the
in
bike, you were out on
in
the
the
bikes
flats.
riding around Berlin?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I think I was the second best rider for one shift. There's
Yeah.
almost four orders
Well,
delivered,
your
something like
cycling
that.
background would help with that.
Yeah. Um, and remember, right, your stakeholder is usually not the operator. So basically, stakeholder will tell you how a thing works, but operator
Yeah.
know how a thing works.
Knows, yeah.
Classic, because you asked me for example. Let's see, that's the other classic thing I had with, with operators, right? Like my stakeholders were telling me for like months and months we need bigger buttons in the restaurant app, and I'm just like, I have no clue why, what you're talking about, we would just not do it. And I was sitting in this restaurant doing user research, and I see how the cook with a big oven glove tries to accept an order on the tablet, and I was like, yep, they need bigger buttons. So so I think that would be the third thing that I basically then would shoot for is in the end you need to build feedback loops that you trust, right? On the one hand, that's data, like build basically your monitoring system that you know how your operations is going. On the other side, it's people, right? Like pick the people you just can jump on a phone. In our case, it's in a kind of, we have installers in the field or salespeople in the field, right? Just chat them up and call them. It's like, hey, how does that thing work for you, or how is this? So you really get like feedback on
Yeah.
certain things you might see in your data but not understand. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of my top three takeaways
Yeah.
from our conversation.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time today. Super interesting. Actually, a topic I've not spoken to too many people about in the past, and I know other people will find it really valuable. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Andrew. Happy to come again and talk more about operating systems whenever you want.
Cool. Thank you.